Hey guys, welcome back. And today we're covering a bit of a disturbing crime that just went down. A bit of a rare one too because it involves a gaijin who is an American who was also working as an ALT, that's an assistant language teacher, a job that I have done myself in the past. It's pretty much a job where you go to an elementary school or a high school or a junior high school and you assist the actual licensed English teacher who sometimes doesn't even speak any English with teaching said language. We use books for elementary school that are called Hello Friends, and we use books for junior high school called The Crown, which is an Oxford book. And as of, I believe, 2 days ago, a man named Joel Habik Benjamin, who lives in Gifu and is 43 years old. I guess he did this to his own job as an ALT, the school that he worked for or was contracted to. And this is something you can get either through a third-party contract or a government contract with the actual Board of Education. The school that he was working for, he sent a smartphone message within, I'm guessing they're using a Line group. Most people in Japan use Line as a work group messaging forum in which they form small groups, that he would show up to the school and execute all the children at the school via stabbing. I've said it in such a weird way because I'm trying not to get demonetized or blocked in multiple countries. So hopefully that wording lets me get it through. The good news is he could not follow through with this. He was arrested before he was. But of course, the amount of criminal charges against him right now are almost equal to what you would have in America. Whereas if you called somebody or you sent a message or a voicemail or recorded a video in which you threatened physical harm or death upon a person, you would get arrested for threats. And that's what happened. Luckily, that's what happened with this guy. What is unlucky is that this guy was an American who was working a job that I once worked as an ALT. And it makes us look even more unstable. We make up only 1% of the population here. We're obviously a very, very tiny population. So when just one of us goes haywire, crazy, or wacky bodaki, it looks bad for all of us. And that's one thing that sucks. Now, the thing about Japan and the way they cover news is they keep a lot very private. So they're not going to say why he threatened the school. They're not going to say what his situation was for living in Japan. And they're not going to release any charges that are being held against him. So those are some aspects we don't know. From what I could translate, it said that the police have not fully laid out all the charges against him, so we don't even have those laid out yet. The downside to this news is that you cannot read it in English yet. It is only in the Japanese newspaper. I believe I read it on NHK, and I'm starting to notice more and more when it comes to English newspapers covering topics within Japan, even ones that are supposedly within Japan, like Japan Times or Japan Today, they are never even close to up to date or about anything that is a hot topic within the actual Japanese news. And almost, I'd say 90% of the time, are like a marketing rag for Japan. They tend to only support positive aspects that would influence travel to Japan, which is unfortunate because it leaves a lot of gaijin who are not bilingual within the Japanese language completely confused by news. Like, why is it so out of date? Why is it behind? Why did I not hear about this in the newspaper that I read? I checked every English source to see if I could get a full translation. There is none. Of course, if you type in this guy's name and where he lives, Benjamin Joel Gifu, 43 years old, you'll probably get the Japanese one, but you might not because you'd have to search on a Japanese Google engine. I guess relocate yourself via a VPN and perhaps you'll find it. Now, like I said, a lot of the information is private, so I've taken it upon myself to kind of try and answer why the heck would this happen. Not just for you, the audience. I mean, I question myself how someone living in Japan, older than me even, would be so brash as to get themselves into this situation. I don't know this guy's living situation or what's going on with him or where exactly he's living in Gifu, but I'm imagining he is either here on a work visa or a spouse visa, and we're about to start the new school year, so this is kind of when new jobs are recommended, suggested, renewed, contracts are renewed. And if you don't know, most contracts within Japan are 1 year on average. Yes, you can get longer ones, 3-5 years, but within the ALT universe, it's pretty rare unless you have like a really good government contact or contract, or you're within the JET program, which I've heard I think it can go now as long as 7 years. So I mean, that's a sweet gig, and they pay for your apartment. Your pay is really quite high. So my theory on this is that this guy's over here as an ALT, and he most likely got frustrated with whatever the situation was teaching here in Japan. If you don't already know, even if you have a teaching license within your own country, it means nothing here. You can't become, a board certified government teacher for public schools. That doesn't work. You would have to go through Japanese citizenship and the Japanese system of schooling to get you that license. So a lot of times there are teachers who come over here who can't believe they are not respected like a teacher back in their own country, which I'm not sure why you think you should be when you are not licensed as a teacher here. There's Japanese people who are licensed with whatever their job is in Japan don't go over to America and expect to have the same license in America. So I'm never sure why any other country thinks vice versa would work. There's way different regulations, there's different school hours, there's different laws, rules, privacy acts, everything. So, I mean, unless you know all that stuff, how could you qualify as a teacher within Japan unless you had actually gone through the training to get said license? And oftentimes this can lead to frustration, not just because they don't have the license to be considered a respected teacher, but because they are upset that they are forced to use the material that the Board of Education gives them. And I will 100% agree that material is garbage. It's never gonna help anybody learn actual English. It's a lot of word memorization, copy and pasting, vocabulary over and over again, rehearsing lines that are robotic and never used within English, such as, "Hello, how are you today? My name is Nantoka. I am from Nantoka. Nice to meet you." Like, no conversation starts off like that. I get it. I get that, like, that's frustrating, especially if you really are out there to help the kids and, seek an actual literacy and fluency rate within the group that you're teaching. But I think if you research it a little bit and find out what the whole gig is when you come to Japan and teach as an ALT, you would realize that, yeah, it's not actually about like getting kids fluent at English. It's edutainment, okay? It's entertaining them with the gaijin in the classroom. You probably feel like the dancing bear sometimes. Some people can handle that, some people can't, some people get upset. I'm guessing this guy probably got pretty upset. Now, I've seen this happen in the past where someone gets fired because they get so upset about the job. And I think that's something that they can learn from and evolve from. So, for example, I had one friend who worked as a teacher at a school, and he had been asked what materials would help him appropriately teach English. He asked for said materials, and they were never delivered. Um, he grew very frustrated with this and threw a bit of a fit at one of the meetings where they asked him for an update on what he had done. And instead of saying, well, I've done the best I can with what I have, he instead got visibly angry. And I don't mean like stand up and throw stuff, but like literally raising his voice and yelling that how is he supposed to teach when he's never even given the stuff that he requested, which I get it, I understand. And I think in an American school or an American meeting, a show of emotion like that would be okay. They'd be like, oh, okay, well, I mean, it makes sense. Like, he can't make progress. He's upset because of that. He cares about the kids. He wants to see them get a proper education. And because of his lack of materials, he cannot. And I mean, mind you, these were some very basic things. Like, the guy wanted like a paper map of the world, some other historical things that would help him teach, like a globe that would spin. Well, I shouldn't say historical, geography, because it was kind of like an international English class. And he never got these things. He threw a fit, and they fired him. As soon as I heard that, I realized just how negative the reaction is to anger in the workplace in Japan. Throwing a fit within the workplace is very uncomfortable for everyone within Japan. And the only attention you will most likely receive is silence or negativity. That's why I always talk about a lot with like being temperate with your emotion around Japanese people. I don't think my friend who got fired was making the situation hostile to a point that people would be afraid, but I can understand where this kind of attitude would not be respected within Japan, because you calmly tell your side of what you're having a problem with. Or pretty much what I do is I just say like, yeah, I've done the best I can with what I've been given. If they really want to bother me, be like, but is there something wrong? But is there something? Then I'll be like, well, I mean, I really could use the stuff that I requested, but I mean, if we don't have a budget for it, I understand. I just try to understand everything and go with the flow. That is what the Japanese call, the harmony of the workplace, the wa of the workplace. And, if the English teacher doesn't even speak in English and teaches the entire English class in Japanese, I'm not going to yell at her for that. She's been doing the job longer than I've been in Japan, most likely. Nothing's going to change because I stepped into their school as a temporary teacher. So why should I try to make any kind of headway and jeopardize my job, right? But there are some that do that, and I have a feeling that's what happened with this guy. He probably had a bit of a fit, a little bit of anger. I understand. I don't understand to a point of like threatening kids. Why would you do that? And I imagine this right now, within the next few days, is the time that contracts will switch over, that a new school year will start. And I imagine his contract was not renewed. And I imagine this led to even more anger. Now, a response of anger to your contract not being renewed is, it's useless within Japan. If you try to yell at somebody to give you your job back, they're gonna be like, yeah, okay, sure. Well, now you really, made it a sure thing that you're never getting your job back. You can't get angry for your job back in Japan. I don't think I could ever see that working unless you were an actual Japanese citizen, and then the laws protect you quite a bit for losing your job. So I'm guessing that's kind of what happened here, because this is happening just on the cusp of everything changing. Like, as in the next week or two, all teachers will be changed over, all contracts will change over. So I'm guessing because he didn't get a response because of this, he felt pushed to make a threatening message on a group line. Now, this, I don't think there's any country where this would be helpful to do. I don't understand how you could be 43 years old and still be that chaotic with your emotion, and how you possess communication to show that emotion. There are much more subtle ways to do as such. There's unions you can join within Japan to somewhat help stabilize your job situation. So why this guy felt like this would give him his job back, I can only put down to some sort of mental distress, as far as not thinking within the moment of their anger and lashing out, which I'm sure everybody's guilty of. Maybe not to this extreme, but and most likely just thinking that perhaps because his first threat or anger or outlash or lash out was not responded to, that he would up the ante, he would go with something bigger. And I think that's where this SNS message came along, where he threatened to stab the children of the elementary school he worked at, and said he would do it until he had killed them all. Which, like, what? Like, no wonder you got fired. No wonder they're not hiring you back. If this is how you end the contract, I don't think the contract ever had any chance to be renewed. So as of yesterday, that man has been arrested. The police, of course, went straight to his house, arrested him. He is awaiting in jail. Now, probably you're wondering what would happen to a person like this after they've done something like this. If you're not nationalized as a Japanese citizen, you're most likely not going to be able to continue to stay in Japan. They're not going to renew any sort of visa that you have, even if it's a permanent resident visa. I imagine you would be deported, and you would not only be deported, but you would be banned from the country for 10 years. So this guy's kind of screwed himself out of any kind of future with Japan. I mean, even after those 10 years, I don't think they would let you back in. They would just look back at your criminal record and see that you made threats of violence against children, and they're gonna be like, yeah, so you kind of blew your chances. Japan does not fool around with this kind of stuff. Maybe there are some very small crimes, like very petty shoplifting, you could be charged for on a permanent resident visa and stay within the country. But almost any time I've seen anybody charged with any kind of like violence or threat of violence, or anything involving physical harm, they're usually tossed out pretty quick, and they don't have any chance to come back. So I'm imagining that's what's happened with Joel Benjamin here. It's part of me is angry that he made other Americans look like crazy people, because we already have an image as like unstable. I think we have a image of not being predictable like most Japanese are, and that already makes some situations very difficult for us. Joel here unfortunately has now made the situation even more difficult, and I'm sure there's even probably going to be some new rules put into place because of what this guy did. At the same time, part of me feels bad for him. He must have been feeling pretty upset that he would go to this length. Of course, I don't know the mental history of this guy. There could be a much more severe mental illness involved, which I imagine there probably is. I mean, this sounds like something you'd only do when you were in the throes of a deep mental illness. And that makes me sad, because I feel like within Japan, when you have a very deep mental illness, it's just brushed aside. Whether you're Gaijin or Japanese, it's still not something that's really noticed or taken care of, or has a lot of outlets for help. Of course, I'm not trying to victim blame here and say that school should have got him help. Now, this guy probably should have never come to Japan. I mean, he probably should have solved his problems mentally up here before he ever came to Japan, and made sure if he did have something that he needed to take medication for or something, I think he should have gotten that in order before he came here and got himself into this situation. Because now, not only has he completely screwed up a future career in Japan, those charges can follow him home and possibly screw him out of any kind of job in America as far as teaching goes. Now, sometimes Japan does just deport and not charge overseas. With this situation, though, I'd want to put them on some kind of watch list when you're threatening children. I mean, that is not something to mess around with. So, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Of course, if there's more information on this, I'll follow up. As of right now, there is very sparse information to the point that I had to theorize on most of this. Of course, you yourself can go look this up. Later, I will pin the comment that will have a link to this. And you may need to use, Google Translator, but I think you'll get through it that way. It translates a little bit strange. I've already checked because I wanted to just copy paste it, translate it, and then copy paste that into my notes, but it came out really weird. It was like, police have not disapproved or approved of Joel yet. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't. That's not what they're saying. So anyway, guys, just kind of an interesting story. This doesn't really happen too often. Yes, there have been school attacks in Japan. There's even one very famous one in Osaka where kids were stabbed. There are security measures, not quite as great as America, as far as like metal detectors and stuff like that. There's never been a school shooting in Japan, but there have been school stabbings, and so that's something I can understand why Japan would take very serious. If you have any more questions, though, about this that I haven't answered, please, I'll put them down in the comments below. I'll try my best. I'll look up more on this as I delve into it deeper. I think there's even a video on it talking about what kind of threat the guy made. They did not say, though, if he made the threat in English or Japanese. I'm guessing maybe he did do it in Japanese because they seem to have responded very quickly. And until next time, you guys have a good one. Stay safe and stay healthy. I'll talk to you again soon.